Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. England beat West Indies by an innings at Lords as Jimmy Anderson bids farewell to Test cricket. I'm Rana, and all I could find today to join me is Phil Walker. Everyone else is otherwise engaged.
Oh, literally?
Literally everyone.
No one else could be asked to turn up.
I've tried everyone, Phil.
I'm a stalwart, so you can always count on me.
He's finally gone, Phil. 188 Test matches, 704 wickets at 26.46. It was a special occasion over the last few days, and it was nice to see him bow out when he was bowling nicely. It's going to be weird not having him around. I literally can't remember a time when he wasn't around.
No, you literally can't, can you? You literally can't. He's dominated your cricket watching life.
Yes.
Or he's been a constant. It was like kind of a play it again, Sam, sort of greatest hits reprise this morning. We're talking what? I mean, you can see behind my shoulder if you're watching it on screen, the post-match pomp and ceremony, which is particularly ramped up at the moment, is all taking place. And he rolled a couple out this morning that were as good as anything he's bowled in his life, which is a good touch. The ball to get rid of the silver was just a joke delivery, really. And it was a bit of a throwback delivery because it swung loads. I mean, he tends to seam it and cant the seam, and you can see what he's trying to do, and obviously pulls it off more often than not. But this was an old school delivery. This was a 2003 World Cup banana ball, and it was almost like he just fancied just showing off one last time,
Bowling from the other end as well. He doesn't normally bowl from, because Atkinson was like, I'm having this one.
Yeah, which is interesting in itself, I suppose. And that's, of course, where he started. He started bowling all those years ago at the nursery end. But yeah, there was undoubtedly that sense with Atkinson, who's crept up on us. He doesn't say much or show much, but he does certainly get it down there consistently quick. And there was that sense of the embryonic stage of the passing of the mantle, passing of the baton on, I suppose. It's one hell of a job to try and emulate him. No one will ever get near it again.
I enjoyed that when he was asked at the end how he was feeling by Nasser. The first thing he said was he was just gutted about dropping that return catch at the end.
No, but he should be. He should be, because what a way to go out with a left-handed grab off your own bowling. But he got the theatre. He got the theatre of the absurd on it. That he did grasp it in the end. But yeah, look, it's been a long time coming, and so what's that term in succession? Pre-grieved, right? So everyone's they've pre-grieved, they've pre-celebrated, they've conditioned themselves emotionally, psychologically to a Jimmy-less landscape. Nonetheless, there's still a few people who are kicking against that reality, of course. And as Stokes himself, with commendable self-awareness, wrote to Anderson after the 7-for at Southport in about half an hour, when in his first outing last week, in the build-up to this game, I think apparently he texted him and said, "Did you really have to do that, Jimmy?" And so, look, there will still be some people who will be hoping for some kind of 11th hour change of heart, change of mind. My boss in the other room envisages a day where England are suddenly bedeviled by some kind of bug or attack of something, and Anderson, of course, being bowling coach, last man standing, and then he gets another go in, I don't know, Peshawar or somewhere like that to actually finally overtake Warne. I think like many, he's hoping against hope.
Yeah. As a sporting contest, though, it wasn't great, and we know that West Indies are a decent side. They beat Australia at the Gabba in their most recent test. But I wanted to start on the gap in preparation, which I know isn't totally unusual. You get that a lot in Test cricket these days. But the gap in preparation between the two sides was absolutely enormous. So Joe Root's first class summer, Joe Root, 11,000 Test match runs, 3,100 and all that. His first class summer started 3 months ago in early April. West Indies arrived for one warm-up game 10 days ago against a very inexperienced but talented group of broadly fringe county players. Jamie Smith, 23 years old, has played more first-class matches this year than Mikhail Louis, the talented West Indies opener, has played his entire career. and they're pretty much exactly the same age. Smith is a month older than Louis. Jayden Seales, who looked very good for West Indies, he's played a lot of county cricket recently. You could tell that he's had a lot of bowling behind him recently. It wasn't a great spectacle. If you didn't have the Anderson farewell looming over this game, I think it would have been quite a hard watch for a lot of it.
Well, I found it a hard watch anyway, personally. I mean, as you know, I left at 5:00 yesterday afternoon with still an hour and a half of play to go because I just couldn't stomach it anymore. And the stirring pageantry of Anderson has actually just drawn a veil over the sadness of what we've seen. And before we get into the weeds of it, it's worth pointing out that this was a similar narrative in Adelaide. I think they played the first Test match in late December, early January, and it was a similar narrative. And then, of course, they turned it around with a win for the ages at the Gabba the following week. I don't think they need our sympathy; they need our support, right? The game, the moneyed side of the game, of which England and the ECB represent so much of that, they need to find a way. They need to find a way to try and stave off these horrible mismatches, where even if these young kids had played out of their boots and all of the luck had gone their way and all of the marginals had fallen their way, they'd have still got stuffed. And that's not their fault. You mentioned Louis, the kid up top. He's clearly going to be a good player if he's given the chance. But will he ever get given that chance? Will he ever get given that chance to be anywhere near the player that he could yet become? Red ball cricket is hard. Red ball cricket against the English at Lord's, with Anderson as your spearhead, is harder than hard. These boys, they had no chance. Lambs to the slaughter. And it doesn't just go back the last 2 or 3 weeks, although it's important. It's not like this collection of players were in the IPL or were playing another Test series somewhere else and they had to jump on a plane and land in London a week before this Test series. They've played that game against a select 11 and they played some stuff in Ireland against an emerging Irish team. They should be playing 3, 4, 5 first-class games. They should be, and it should be, if money is tight, it should be paid for by the ECB, because it's the ECB ultimately that is putting on this game. And it's the ECB that needs games to run to 4 days, 5 days. It's the ECB that needs to present a persuasive package for the next round of TV money and all the rest of it. That what we've seen there is a travesty of a sporting mismatch, and nobody outside of the players themselves escapes without some degree of responsibility for it.
For the record, I think West Indies always have a chance because of how good their bowlers are. It's a very, very strong bowling attack, which will produce the odd result like what they did at the Gabba. You know, if you've got the two Josephs, Jayden Seales, Jason Holder, Gudakesh Moti, they will win the odd Test matches. But yeah, it was quite striking how, no one was talking about the pitch in the end because West Indies were bowled out for sub 150 in both innings. But it was a slow pitch. It wasn't, like Trent Bridge or Edgbaston day one pitches of years gone by where it's quick, there's a bit of grass on it. And if you get the ball in the right areas, it's very difficult to bat. It actually was broadly fine, which was actually what made the West Indies collapse in both innings all the more stark. It feels like COVID accelerated a view of what international cricket is for administrators, in that it essentially exists to fulfill existing broadcast contracts. And you just need to get the game on and that's it. And so little thought goes into what actually makes it a spectacle. I worry about crowd attendances in years to come in series that don't involve the top teams. If this becomes the norm, you look at, we're really lucky in England, and I know we have a predominantly UK-based audience. Look at the crowd in Australia for a lot of these series. So basically no one was there for that Gabba Test match because in the last decade or so, when Australia play at home against pretty much everyone other than India, they destroy them. So people stop coming to games. we're really lucky in the UK that there's a real in-ground culture of selling out pretty much every day of Test cricket that's put on. We shouldn't take that for granted. If this is, people are paying more than 100 quid for a ticket for a day out in Lords, they're not getting 100 quid's worth of entertainment. It felt like England, with the bat in particular, it just felt like England was second gear. And it's such a shame. You only get nowadays 6 home tests a summer, and that's one of them gone. And I think that, I don't think we're being dramatic in talking about it in these terms. But it wasn't really a great spectacle.
To me personally, that's been the hardest watch that I can remember watching Test cricket in this country, because you bleed for the West Indies. You're so desperate for them to be given the chance to compete. Look, I spoke to. I was sort of spirited into the president's box yesterday. Talk about a spare prick at a wedding. Talk about imposter syndrome. Anyway, I was in Mark Nicholas's president's box yesterday for a bit. And in the box next to me was Johnny Grave, the CEO of West Indies. And he waved over to me because I've known him for a while. And so I went into his box. That didn't go down too well, by the way, with some of the luminaries. But anyway, I went to go and sit with him. And he was pretty pragmatic about it, because they are kind of immune to the setbacks now. They are ensconced in the reality, and it's a bleak one. And it put me in mind of an interview that Johnny Grave gave, and Johnny Grave, CEO of West Indies Cricket. Johnny Grave gave an interview to one of our freelance writers, Daniel Gallen, for the magazine 2 or 3 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, in fact, after Brisbane. And it came screaming back to me after our chat yesterday. And he said, and this is back in February this year, and this is important when we talk about the state of West Indies cricket and what we want from the West Indies. It's important to bear in mind that cricket is wild. And so next week, they might just sort of bowling them out for 150. And the boy Louis or Athanase, who looks like a good player, he might come of age in an afternoon, and suddenly you've got a game on. Cricket always has this ability to chuck the obituarists' words back in their face. So it's an important caveat. I think they will have a moment over the next 2 Test matches. Nonetheless, the broader picture is what Graves said to Daniel Gallen a few months ago. And I've got it up here. I think everyone is sick of the phrase "world cricket needs a strong West Indies" because, and this is, listen to this, because we feel, as in the West Indies Cricket Board feels, that world cricket is doing everything it can on almost every level to make sure that West Indies is never strong again. That's from the CEO of the West Indies Board. That is born of the frustration of that patronising tone, which you've had a lot of in the last few days. No one really wants to address it full on. No one really wants to look at it. Instead, we talk around the edges. If you really want a strong West Indies, he says, then it shouldn't be that hard to do a bit more. In 2018, Grave and his board published a report calling for radical change. It advocated for a more equitable revenue share between Test-playing nations, with broadcast rights pooled to help away teams to cover their own costs. Famously, the West Indies costs are particularly high because they are a collective of nations within an overall region. It's very hard for them to establish their own TV rights packages because there are 14 different regions, 14 different countries with their own requirements. And he said it wasn't just lobbying on behalf of West Indies cricket, it was on behalf of the game itself. What happens a year later or 2 years later? In May last year, the ICC approved a revamped revenue distribution model that hands the BCCI, the Board of Control of Indian Cricket, 38.5% of the ICC's annual net earnings across the next 4 years. That amounts to 183 million of the 475 million available, right? Listen to this. Between the BCCI, the ECB and Cricket Australia, they would collect 13.14%. The remaining 9 boards would have to make do with less than half of global cricket's take. So that's solidifying, it's cementing what we've seen today. And in the midst of it are these young kids who are coming up through a challenging infrastructural setup, who are exposed to NWA, never seen it before, let alone played there before, and you're rolled out to the masses who just fancy. It's like Colosseum stuff, They just want to see Anderson do his thing. They want to applaud from the galleries, and if these kids are the lambs to the slaughter, then so be it. Well, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for the game, and I found it really, really, really hard to watch.
And it's also not just about West Indies. West Indies is the example here, but that's the second time in a row a Test summer has started in similar fashion. There was the England-Ireland Test match at the start of last summer, where that was a total mismatch. Ireland had a good day there, which West Indies didn't have here. But I fear it's increasingly the norm. And you're right. Both West Indies and then Sri Lanka come later. Both have quality that gives them a chance in an individual game, but it feels like you're looking for something freakish to happen for an even contest. And that cannot be the default position, but unfortunately, that is where we're at.
We wrote in the magazine about a titanic rivalry. Well, historically it is, but how can it ever be maintained? How can it ever find new life when we have an already extreme set of circumstances that, as Graves said to me yesterday, and Graves said to the magazine a few months ago, the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer. The important point he made is still the big three, they need a strong landscape. They need Test cricket to be strong, or else the thing that still defines the game for so many people really will wither away and die.
And I think
they need them in order to be competitive and in order to sell their own TV rights time after time.
And England more than the other two in the big three because of the culture we have of turning up to games, etc., etc. On the pitch, Gus Atkinson bowled well. 12 wickets in the match, 7 in the first innings, 5 in the second. I was really pleased with how he was used, because I think in the past, England have had a tendency, when they've had a slightly quicker bowler, to almost use them as an out-and-out battering ram. But here, he was just a good bowler who bowled well, who also happened to be quick. And you could see also that he's quite skillful, he's accurate, can move the ball in both directions. And I completely hear what you said before about West Indies preparation, but West Indies were 88 for 3 on that first morning, in that first afternoon, and it was Atkinson who completely changed the feeling of the game. Woakes and Anderson bowled prettily up until that point, but without a lot of penetration. That penetration came from Atkinson, who we've talked about a fair bit, but I don't think...
It was nice when you came up to me yesterday in the press box and says, well, at least we don't speak total bollocks all the time.
But it was a really, really good performance from Atkinson.
It was, and this is what he does. He bowls middle overs. It's an enormous benefit for this England side if they can find him and hone him into that role. It may well be that he becomes a very, very good new ball bowler as well. But to have a bowler who comes on first change and changes the dynamic, the tempo of an innings, that's absolutely essential in Test cricket. And he has it. He has an interesting action, which has a sort of twofold effect, I think. On the one hand, and both of it is positive. On the one hand, it looks like he can conserve energy because he runs through the crease. And there's not this elaborate jump. And so he doesn't jar the body either. And so while no one suggests that he's not putting a lot of effort in, nonetheless, he cruises through the crease. And so...
There's no momentum lost.
No,
There's no momentum lost
and he doesn't look out of breath, and he doesn't look like he's panting. We've seen a lot of him live in 4-day cricket in the last couple of years. But the other thing, because of that style, it becomes hard to pick up because there is no clue, there's no tell. And so the short balls are nasty. They're nasty, and we've seen it at the Oval a lot. We've seen it in the last couple of days at Lord's as well, because there is no clue handed to you as a batter. Normally, when a bowler is looking to really bang it in, a real effort ball, then you see it. You see it in the run-up. You see it in how they land in their gather and at the crease. With him, there's no change. So it becomes really hard to pick up. And his speeds he didn't drop past be lower than 86, 87 at the lowest, right? So that's really, really impressive. That shows that he can bowl longish, penetrative spells. He's a find, no doubt. He's a find. And he's relatively accurate as well.
Yeah.
He's not a tearaway by any means.
Yeah.
He has kind of old virtues, but wrapped up in a modern sort of package.
I really like his overall vibe. Like, he just seems very unfazed by everything. There was a video that the ECB put up on their social media of Ollie Pope presenting Atkinson with his cap. So Pope and Atkinson are the same age. They were part of the same Surrey age group side from the age of 10 or 11. Pope's giving this really nice speech, and Atkinson's there totally without expression, as if he doesn't really give a shit. Really, it's like all he cares about. I do like that. It gives me Cole Palmer vibes. You know, it's like he just does it, and he doesn't make it into a bigger deal than it actually is. He doesn't love the interviews and the press stuff that he has to do. You can tell that he's probably. You're
a journalist. Why do you like this? Why do you like a completely blank page?
I think it's good to have variety. You know, right now on screen there's currently Stuart Broad who loved that sort of stuff, and I like that. Yeah, you can have someone who loves that sort of stuff, and you have someone who doesn't have much time for it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Perhaps that pragmatism comes from having had quite a circuitous route to getting there as well. 3 stress fractures, hardly bowled a ball across 3 professional seasons. He's been on the Surrey books for a long time. He's been around for quite 26. A long time.
He's not that young.
Yeah, but of course the flip side of that is that he hasn't actually bowled that many overs in anger, and so while the body has had to repair itself a number of times, it's not necessarily going to have the wear and tear that you get from having been flogged as a young lad, which is the case with other bowlers.
Phil, there's a new magazine promo.
Yeah, there is. It came out yesterday. Jamie Smith in exclusive. There we go on the cameras. Joe managed to get hold of Jamie Smith about 24 hours before we went to print. An excellent piece of work, and he is, he's a classy kid. I guess we'll come to him in a moment. But yeah, we have a couple of offers for you folks. We've got a brand new subscription option for print subscribers, and to make this even better, I'm reading here, yes, and to make this even better, if you follow the link that we'll stick in the show notes at the bottom and use the code, get a pen and paper, get your notes up on your phone, WCM WCW free 24, and you get your first issue of this monthly offer for free. For digital subscribers, you get your first issue for 99p before moving on to the regular year-long subscription of just 24 quid minus 1p. So 24 quid for a year's worth of digital WCMs. And the print offer is equally persuasive. We've got both offers running until the conclusion of the England-Sri Lanka summer series. Wow. So plenty of time to get stuck in. Do it. Mm-hmm. It's comfortably the finest cricket magazine known to humanity. And this, of course, is the first one under a Labour government, so I would suggest that you go out and get it. It's a souvenir issue.
Seb asked, is there a worse test ground in the country to host a big test like this than Lord's? Crowd barely acknowledged the wickets and boundaries compared to Broad and Cook at the Oval. The difference is crazy. I'm not a fan of Lord's. I had a few mates who were there on day 2, and a couple of them were texting me, and these are guys who watch test cricket around the country, and they were saying how bad the atmosphere was, just as what Seb says in the question, barely any acknowledgement of action taking place. And I've said it for a couple of years now. Now that there are 6 rather than 7 home test matches in an English summer, I think it's a disgrace that Lord's gets a third of them. The crowd is the least representative of English grounds of the people who actually play and watch cricket in the country. And I think Seb is 100% right in the question. The atmosphere in the last 3 days has been just meh, really.
Do you think that's in part because of what's being shown on the pitch itself? Or do you think this is indicative of a yearly story here?
The quality of the cricket and the quality of the contest definitely plays a part. But I think there's a broader thing about Lord's having a third of English home test matches. I think, in 2027, there isn't a Northern Ashes test match. We're not sharing,
diabolical.
Yeah, we're not sharing the cricket around the country well enough. And yeah, I think if you've got 6 home test matches a year, obviously have 1 at Lords, shouldn't have 2. And yeah, I'd like there to be more of a move for that. Obviously, that is unlikely to be a popular idea among the powers that be, but I think English fans would probably appreciate that.
Yeah, look, I wholeheartedly agree. I think there was something particularly. It was hard to get your teeth into the fair this time round, in particular, because of how one-sided and therefore how kind of almost poignant it was on day one. Camera cutting to Viv Richards et al. In the stands. Viv standing up and applauding, I think it was Alzari Joseph, when he played an attacking shot and you're 100 for 8. It was particularly notable towards the end, the fag end of day one, when Crawley was batting nicely into his game with that crispness of shot, and the crowd were barely acknowledging it. Now, in part, that's the Lord's syndrome. It's also, how can you really get your juices flowing for a game that is so denuded of any real competitive instincts? It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch wherever you are. And the broader question about the predominance of London Test matches is absolutely a fair one, and it's a lesser game because of it. And you are risking losing, or certainly alienating or relegating people around the country. For sure, you are. But there was something uniquely tricky about engaging with this particular game as well, I think. Says someone who's sat in the executive MCC president's box for a couple of hours yesterday. But no doubt. The game happens incidentally to a lot of people, and it's a social occasion
with cricket in the background.
Yeah. So someone said that to me as well. Actually, who's involved with West Indies cricket, they said, "My God, I forgot what it's like here." You know, it wasn't Johnny Gray for the record, but somebody who was over here. But with a West Indies badge on them, and they said, "Yeah, I forgot what it's like," and that's undoubtedly the case. I'm just
trying to think of West Indian players from years gone by who.
It's not him either, for the record. It's not him either.
At Tubby Little Man asks, where does Woakes fit in with Ash's planning? At Tubby Little Man. That's the name that he's chosen for himself, so you just got to respect it.
It's like David Bowie in Extras. Doesn't matter. You won't get a record.
Where does Woakes fit in with Ash's planning? Rockstar at home, but not so tardy away. Can he adapt? I don't think Woakes is part of England's Ashes planning. I think he's in this team because he had a really good summer last year. There's a massive series at home against India next summer, and he bats at 8, as well as how good he is with the ball in home conditions. He balances the side in a way that none of the other main bowlers do at the moment. I think it was interesting seeing how rusty he was. I think it was he was well down on pace, a good 5 to 7 miles per hour down on his usual pace. It's the sort of performance that if Ollie Robinson put in, people would be talking about it a lot more than they are that Woakes did it. He bowled pretty lines. He got the ball to move away from the right-hander as he always does, but at a pace that was really unthreatening, really. So it'll be interesting to see how England use him over the rest of the summer, because he's not played a lot of cricket recently. He's played a couple of championship games where he didn't do that well in. But yeah, in years gone by, he's taken a while to get into his work after coming back from a layoff. So hopefully he'll be back to normal for the next Test match, but that is something to watch. He's 35 years old. He's no spring chicken.
No, indeed. But I don't think... Sometimes I think people want everything. They want all the cake and to eat it all. You can't criticise England for looking forward to the Ashes and then also criticise them for picking someone with an outstanding record for the here and now. It's a bob each way. They've picked him, as you say, quite rightly, not with a view to Australia, and God forbid would he want to go to Australia anyway, as he's quite open about that. You know, his game is tailored now, as you say, in his mid-30s to red ball cricket in England, and England exclusively. But you have to respect the games in front of you, as well as look beyond those. So I think it's fine. I think it's entirely understandable. I was a bit surprised to see him in the squad. I thought Robinson would take that position, mainly because Woakes hadn't played that much cricket coming into it, and that Robinson had played and would look good for a gallop with what I'd seen anyway. Nonetheless, he was the star of last summer, and so it's hardly unreasonable, I think, to have picked him. But I think it's one to watch. Really, it would be interesting to see what does happen there, because he was an ineffectual figure in that attack.
Yeah, if people didn't watch it, he was bowling at 77, 78 miles per hour for much of this test match.
Yeah.
In this week's How Does Dan Lawrence Get a Spot in the Team, Ben cheekily suggested yesterday that Stokes at 8, Lawrence at 6 is the way to go. It was really nice to see Stokes bowl wince-free for the first time in several years, actually. He took his 200th test wicket. He's the third man to score 6,000 runs and take 200 wickets.
Is that right?
Test cricket. Yeah, after Callis and Sober, so it's a pretty good club. It's another low score with the bat, though, and he was bowled by a good, but I don't think it was a great ball by
Doesn't
Moti.
matter.
And Stokes makes him look great.
Doesn't matter.
He loves a reaction.
Doesn't matter.
305 runs at 19 for Stokes in first class cricket in 2024. But yeah,
I just wish, don't gamble, kids, unless you want to. I just wish I'd put a fiver on Stokes to get under 10 in that, because he's walking out in a mismatch when you're 200 and something for 4. He's never getting runs ever. Never has, never will, ever in that situation. You can add it to a broader narrative if you like, but in isolation, he's never getting that. He's never making runs in that game. I was surprised that he reacted at all when he got out. It was an ambitious shot, to say the least.
Moti bowled really well, by the way.
He did, and
he was
look,
the first
again,
one to sort of West Indies bowler to have real control.
Yeah,
the ball to get root was a Jaffa as well, an arm ball that root read, but it was sort of like, if you're playing an in-swinger, you play inside the line of it, you're sort of assuming the ball coming more than it actually does in the end. And he can mix his pace up really well as well. I think he's got an amazing first-class record, but there are a lot of West Indies spinners who have amazing first-class records, but he looks like someone who could have success pretty much wherever he goes.
I watched him from side on, and he bowls at a really good pace for Test cricket. He's much sharper than others. You know, he really does zip it through. And if you clean bowl 2 of England's legends on the morning of day 2 at Lord's, then you've got something going on.
Well, how often does Joe Root get bowled by a clean bowl by a spinner?
Yeah, and you know, some of their seamers turned up nicely as well. You know, Jaden Seals looked good, looked really good. The ball to get rid of Crawley was a top moment in the game. I don't think there's a massive amount wrong with their bowling attack. They're just a desperately fallow batting side.
No, I think restricting England to 371 on that pitch was actually a very good job. Scores at Lord's this year have been incredibly high. It was noticeable from the first few overs just how slow the pitch was. There was so little pace in it. England's slip cordon was standing almost weirdly close to the stumps. Jamie Smith, who we'll get onto in a second, taking so many balls at shin to ankle height. Other than Atkinson, really, no one was getting the ball above waist height to Smith.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a slow wicket that I think West Indies actually did all right with the ball.
No, I agree.
First impressions on Jamie Smith, the Test cricketer. Like Atkinson, we watched a lot of him the last couple of years, but very tidy behind the stumps, and in a similar way to Atkinson, I'd say, unfazed when he was out there with the bat, just did his thing. Yeah.
So no dramas at all with the gloves?
Not at all. I don't think he conceded a single bye in either innings. Let me just double check that. Yeah, no byes.
Okay. Well, obviously there's going to be tougher days with the gloves. For all that Lord's can be a bit tricky because it swings and it keeps a bit low. He's only had to keep across
80 overs.
80 overs.
Yeah.
So there will be much tougher days. Nonetheless, England aren't amateurs, right? They'd have done their due diligence. They would have studied the work that he has done in professional cricket with the gloves, and they would have spoken to the right people. The gaffer, Alex Stewart, was there in one of the boxes yesterday afternoon. You know, of course they'd have spoken to him. Is he ready? And he would have given him an honest answer, even if it would have meant that the great Ben Foakes has to step aside. Incidentally, Foakes has been in Smith's ear for the last week and a half since the squad was named, giving him tips, secrets, tricks of the trade. So impressive enough with the gloves. But look, he's not in there for his glove work. He's in there because what a talent to have at number 7, right? What a talent.
I thought it was really encouraging to see just how normally
didn't even
he
play
batted.
that well. And we've seen how good he is. He didn't even play that well, and he's still strummed a 70.
Well, he was 37 off 84 by the time West Indies took the second new ball. And then given the match situation, he had Joe Root for company initially, then Chris Woakes. He saw that his job was just get to the second new ball, take the runs that are on offer because there aren't any demons in this pitch. There's a lot of runs there for the taking. And it was when Woakes fell, then you saw the gears that he's capable of going up through. And it's what England have identified as what they really like about Smith. You know, this is a guy who's 23 years old. He's got 2 70 ball hundreds in first class cricket already. One for the England Lions against Sri Lanka, one for Surrey in that record chase of 501 against Kent last year. And there wasn't a single run scored off the bat from Atkinson, Bashir and Anderson at 9, 10 and 11. And Smith was able to put on, I think, 32 runs himself in that time. And there were 2 extraordinary shots. 3, actually. There was the 6 into the grandstand off Shamar Joseph.
The one that landed on the roof.
There was, that was the one that just went into the stands. Then there was the one at the other end that went over the tavern stand. And then there was also a sweep off Seals that pierced the gap between deep square leg and deep fine leg. He's a really classy player. For me, what's going to be really interesting is where does he end up? I think as a pure batting talent, he is the most exciting England have had since Brook. I know that was only a couple of years ago, but I think he's a level above the other young guys that lots of people talk about. I think those 2 will likely be the middle order engine room for years to come. But Smith's at 7 with the gloves. Maybe that's something he does for a while. But I'll be fascinated to see how he develops in the next few months.
Well, I think he stays as the wicketkeeper up until the end of the Ashes. There's a prediction for what it's worth. I think it balances the side perfectly. And why would you start again? Why would you start looking elsewhere? Why would you start reshaping and causing more problems for yourself when you've landed on a really good option here? And as we say, it's a cliche, but there are harder places to keep in the world than Australia. Let's put it that way. He's tall, he's agile, he's hungry, he's young, and he's brilliant. It seems like an outstanding decision to have him at 7 and to keep. And sure, when he's 26 in 3 years' time or whatever, 27, and Joe Root's coming to the end, perhaps, and Stokes has had enough, then he slips in as your middle order gun, and you bring in another keeper because he'll be too good. He'll be too good to hold back. But for the first 2 years, for sure, 7 and keep. Perfect.
A reminder, this is a guy who, in that Surrey top 6, where everyone has played Test cricket, he's the one at 4. He's the one who they build the lineup around. Will McPherson wrote a piece in the Telegraph this week about like the making of Jamie Smith and just how highly rated he's been for a long time. There's a line from Dom Sibley, who's played for England for 2 years and is part of this very successful Surrey team, who just said, this bloke's a genius. You know, even among the most talented players going, this is a guy who stands out. So, it was an encouraging debut. I think what is almost the most striking thing is he got 70 and people who've seen a lot of him are just like, yeah, that's what we've come to expect.
Yeah. And look, there will be some tough times with the gloves, and there'll be a couple of high profile drops. And there'll be some challenging standing up to the spinners down the line.
That he's yet to do, because
he's yet to do,
Bashir, good old fashioned TFC. Thanks for coming, Shreb.
Lovely to see. But I just hope people give him a degree of leeway, because the pros massively outweigh the cons on this.
Absolutely. Well, that is everything for today.
Are we done already?
Phil. Thanks for listening.
I'm just getting warmed up.
We'll be back early next week.